So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. We really are excited about our speaker today. But first I would like to say that Dr. Liz England unfortunately will not be with us today because she is in Uzbekistan and quite busy with her job there. Plus I think it's 5 a.m. for her. And I'd like to thank Wei Yu, our TESOL CPD tech person who is going to run the tech portion of the program. And so this is Jessie Labiste Jr., and he is the assistant professor in the Division of Professional Education at the University of the Philippines, Visayas. And he is going to talk with us today about a very interesting topic, contextualizing learning and instruction, considerations for a culturally responsive language education. And Jessie's going to give ideas to teachers and language educators on how a culturally responsive class can be designed using local fishing communities in the Philippines as a context. So we're very excited to hear about that. Before I turn it over to Jessie, though, I have three just very quick announcements. I would like to let you know that in December, we have a couple of events coming up. One is, if you recall from last year, our 60-second story, which is something that we ask all of our followers on Facebook and all of our TESOL CPD members to join in. We'd like you to make a video or an audio, and it just should be 60 seconds. And we're looking for submissions by the end of the year. And we'd like you to tell us about your year in teaching. What were the good points? What were the bad points? What were the challenges? That kind of thing. And so then we'll roll out these stories beginning January 2022. So look for the announcement on Facebook because that will be out either tomorrow or the next day. And then the one other thing that we are having in December is December 17th at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We're having another tea party. And this is an end of year event also, but it's just for everyone to come and chat and share ideas. And we love this event because we get to hear from all of you about what we did that worked this year and maybe some great ideas for what we can do for next year. So please plan on attending that. And once again, look for the announcement that will be coming soon. And then the third announcement and last announcement is our next webinar is going to be in January 14th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Also announcements will be coming out with Dr. Julie Lake, Rezwana Islam, and Prakash Chandragiri, and they are going to talk about hope and sustainability in academic success, applying for a higher degree in TESOL. And so please follow our website and look for the announcements for all of these events. Okay, with that being said, I know everyone is anxious to hear from our speaker, so I will turn it over to you, Jessie. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Linda. Thank you very much, Wei, for helping us here. Mayong aga sa inyong nga tanan. That is good morning to each and everyone from here from Iloilo, Philippines. A beautiful morning greeting from the Philippines. Allow me to begin by thanking TESOL Career Program Development Professional Learning Group for inviting me today and for allowing me to share a little bit of what I know about how we can make language learning more meaningful and relatable to our learners. Thanks also to TESOL International for organizing a webinar series that helps our teachers all across the globe. Activities like this surely catapults the teaching of English in various contexts and teaching environments, while we form communities and networks where we can both teach and learn at the same time. I hope you can hear me well. I'm here in my hometown in Dueñas, Iloilo. I pray that the connection works until the presentation. We're working at the mercy of technology today. But today I'm going to share what I have called from my own research work and from the public service engagements that I'm in here in the Philippines. But please give me the indulgence to share first a little bit about what we do here in the University of the Philippines, Visayas, and in particular, the Division of Professional Education of the College of Arts and Sciences. So my name is Jessie. I teach in the Master of Education program here in UPV. This is a constituent unit of the University of the Philippines system. I teach especially in the MEd ESL, or English as a Second Language program. This is a Master's of Education degree program. I also handle senior high school courses in our secondary school unit, that is the UP High School in Iloilo. And apart from teaching, I'm also the faculty in charge of the language program of the university that supervises training programs, research, and extension and outreach activities of the college, especially in the fields of language and literacy. Because the University of the Philippines system is a state university, meaning it is run by government funds, we have to work on our tripartite role as members of the faculty. Therefore, we must teach while at the same time conduct research and perform public service programs that will benefit both our university and the publics. So in UPV, our mandate is to develop research and public service programs that revolve around fisheries and ocean sciences and the promotion and preservation of Western Visayas cultural heritage, because we are situated in Region 6 in the Philippines, that is Western Visayas. Having fisheries as our flagship program, UPV strives to be at the forefront of fisheries education in the region. Thus, we see that contributing to this mandate should not only be limited in our academic programs in fisheries, but also in other degree programs all across the university. So it's like we're situating our degree programs or other degree programs in the context of fisheries and Western Visayas culture. As for my area, English language education, our work revolves around teaching, research, and public service that gives premium on the integration of local cultural contexts in the language classroom. Specifically, my work is centered towards the in-depth analysis of teacher beliefs and practices of secondary school English language teachers in contextualizing language lessons, particularly in the maritime culture. Also, we work with public school teachers to provide them with workshops and training opportunities on contextualization, especially those residing in coastal communities. These workshops and training led to the development of teaching and learning materials, the production of learning aids, lesson exemplars, and curriculum guides were based on collaborative efforts of the teachers, community members, and other stakeholders. But why are we so focused at contextualizing learning and instruction? Why do you think so? Why in the Philippines, this is our byword, why we would want to advocate for a contextualized language learning and instruction? I invite you to memorize what's on the slide in 1 minute, just a little of an activity here. I want you to memorize the following. In 1 minute, I'll give you 1 minute and then try to memorize this, okay? All right. Can anyone say what was on the slide? Can anyone say what was on the slide I just showed you? It's kind of difficult, right? Even my friends from the Philippines who are attending this webinar, I'm not sure if you can grasp what was the meaning of what I presented to you. How about this one in 1 minute again? Quite easier, right? Can everybody say what was on the second slide? If you have your microphones on. What was on the second slide?
Claire played on the plaza. Something?
Yes. Claire played in the plaza after finishing her household chores. All right, very easy. Thank you very much. The question is simple here. Which of the two can be memorized easier? Why is it so? Which of the two can be memorized easier? Of course, the second slide. Why is it so? Because the second slide was easier because the mind naturally seeks meaning in context by searching for relationships that make sense and appear useful. Learning occurs only when students process new information or knowledge in such a way that it makes sense to them in their own frames of reference. This is called contextual learning. If you're wondering what was on the first slide, it's nothing. I just invented them. It's not even Filipino language. It's not even one of our languages here in the Philippines. I just invented them. When the Philippine government shifted the educational landscapes from having a 10-year basic education to a 12-year basic education program, with the addition of 2-year senior high school program, the Department of Education recalibrated the curriculum at the same time, giving premium to local cultural context as one of the factors to encourage meaning making in the classroom. So the term contextualization became the byword in many teacher training programs and induction ceremonies to achieve a more relatable classroom and fruitful learning experience for the students, where immediate contexts are used as platforms in various learning areas. So my friends here from the Philippines who this webinar, they're quite familiar with this, no? The term contextualization. So as the Philippine...
Jessie?
Yes?
Sorry, this is Linda. Could I interrupt for one moment? I'm only seeing the top part of your slide. I think I'm missing. Yeah, okay. Now I can see the whole thing. So maybe you can make it so that we can see the whole thing. Okay. Thank you.
I'm just about to move them up. Anyway, so the term contextualization became the byword, as I've said, in many teacher training programs. The Department of Education would call for training programs, seminars, and workshops to train teachers how to contextualize their language lessons, and in fact, in all other learning areas. This is to achieve a more relatable classroom and fruitful learning experience for the students, because we want to utilize the immediate context and use them as platform in various learning areas. So as the Philippine Curriculum Guide would put it, contextualization in language education will make language classrooms position itself towards meaning making to facilitate the use of language related skills to suit the contexts of the learners. So it's called contextual learning in Philippine English language teaching. According to proponents of constructivism, learning takes place when information is presented in a way that learners are able to construct meaning based on their own experiences. So this one was enunciated in the Basic Education Curriculum, or the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013, or in the Philippines, we call it RA, or Republic Act 10533. In fact, to maximize the utilization of local culture, this Republic Act reinstalled the use of mother tongue as a medium of instruction in kindergarten and primary elementary years. In fact, from kindergarten up to grade 3. So in grade 4, the teaching of English will be introduced. Or in grade 3, the teaching of English will be introduced, but they will begin with their mother tongue. So to emphasize the local culture and the local languages. This is to recalibrate the curriculum by providing a culturally responsive language education. With this, teachers get to localize, and others would call it indigenize, the language curriculum through the use of local, social, and cultural contexts. Since our mandate is to help schools in the implementation of the programs, I visited schools in predominantly coastal communities. And what we did was we navigated the English language classrooms and talked with school teachers, students, and community members how we can put together the context and integrate them in the instructional sequence. So we analyzed teacher beliefs, looked into their practices, and interviewed them to get a picture how language education implements contextualization. Choosing a venue to do this seems not to be a problem considering the archipelagic makeup of the Philippines. You know that we live in mostly coastal communities. So in my case, we visited coastal communities here in Panay Island, that's the heart of the Philippines, and discovered that indeed teachers make attempts at contextualizing their instruction using localized context and indigenous knowledge in developing learning materials and designing learning activities. In fact, in one of our areas here, I went and visited Estancia National High School. This is known to be the largest school in Northern Iloilo. In fact, if you can see in the slide, just in 2018 to 2019, they have more than 5,000 students, and this is a big school already in the Philippines. And student population here is dominated by those who reside in and along coastal communities, although some even would come from nearby island barangays. So why do you think we're looking into making classrooms contextualized and language lessons contextualized? What constitutes contextual learning and instruction? Contextual learning and instruction includes hands-on learning. This is where students learn by doing. You're very familiar with this. Instead of simply listening to a teacher or instructor giving a lecture about a given subject, the students will engage themselves with the subject matter to solve a problem or create something. This is also called real-world education. A real-world education is a set of skills or a breadth of knowledge that you attain outside of a traditional classroom or a corporate setting. It is teaching students how to become street smart. While others would consider this as an active learning because students here participate actively and interact as opposed to the usual passive taking of information. Another way of contextualized learning is done through integrated learning when students make connections among concepts and experiences so that information and skills can be applied to novel and complex issues or challenges. There are others who consider this also as project-based learning, where students gain knowledge and skills by responding to authentic, engaging, and complex questions or problems. But what the government is also keen about in using contextualized learning and instruction is its emphasis on skills that the students can learn, which will be beneficial and applicable in their future careers and life endeavors. Others would call it applied learning or school to career approach to education. What is important though is that education should be something relatable for the learners, where students are provided with a venue to put into context the things that they are learning. In fact, when teachers are asked what they think about contextualization in their English language classrooms, these teachers believe that with contextualization, they may be able to provide their students with a meaningful and culturally relevant way of presenting the language-based concept. So if they learn adjectives or adverbs, they will be able to easily make connections because it is based on a particular cultural artifact or a particular cultural material. And then students here will be able to rehearse with their language-related skills that will be very much relevant, in their language use inside and outside the school. Now, how do we integrate the local culture? In my example, maritime culture in the English language classroom. So I would like to zero in on the use of maritime culture, since this is the most predominant cultural landscape here in Panay. Although there are some upland areas as well, what we can do here is to utilize the framework or the considerations here for you to contextualize your own lessons depending on wherever you are. I mean, it does not always have to be maritime culture. So in this case, I would offer 4 ducts or entry points. In the maritime context, docks are basins for the reception of vessels. So I would use the same term to show where can we begin, considering the integration of a local culture and social context in the English language lesson. So I will call them docks.
Jesse,
Yes,
may I interrupt you one moment? Sorry, we're still only to see a portion of your slide, like the upper part. Is there a way for you to enlarge it so that we can see the entire slide?
how about this one?
That's better, but I don't think we see the whole thing.
For the entire time?
Yeah, if you can maybe move it up a little bit.
All right. Okay,
because, yeah, that's better.
okay. Sorry. I
That's
didn't
better.
realize.
No, thank you. I just want to make sure that everyone can see these beautiful slides that you have.
Sorry, I didn't realize that. All right. So as I was saying, I'm going to introduce 4 docks or entry points in maritime context. This is how you're going to contextualize it using the maritime culture. But of course, we can contextualize it depending on where the school community is situated. So for first, we need to assert the primacy of learner needs. All the time, I think we need to invest on knowing the learner needs. Number 2 is to build a repertoire of techniques for maritime culture integration. And then 3, we need to engage teachers with a local culture. And then 4, we need to steer instruction to provide a culturally relevant language learning experience. Allow me to go to each item one by one. So for Duck 1 considers the primary of learner needs as the front line of these considerations. It has to be noted that teachers would refer to learner needs as an arbiter in the decision-making as regards to the use of contextualization. They believe that since learners come from diverse backgrounds with different interests, learners also have different learner needs. Thus, contextualizing the language class should also be based on what the needs of the students are. So here, one of the teachers would say that the use of local context made the difference since there are those who are good enough in expressing themselves using the English language, but there are those sections, there are those classes who are kind of slow in expressing themselves, slow, timid, bashful, shy in expressing themselves using the English language. So what are the suggestions here? One of my suggestions here is for the teacher to know their students' varied life goals. In my conversation to some of the teachers and even parents, their students would study depending on their life goals. Others would like to become teachers someday. And then you can see how assiduous this particular student in terms of his or her studies. There are those who would like to say that I don't think that I can go to college. I will be the one who will assist my father and go into fishing. So I don't see the relevance of the English language lessons that I get from the class. So they will study based on their varied life goals. So this is my first suggestion, because not everyone wants to finish their degrees and leave their place for work, but rather earn a degree and go back to their communities and serve there. However, others would choose another profession. They don't want to become like their parents, fish vendors, fishermen, or tourist guides. Some students would also pay attention to English class because they recognize that English is something useful for them in the future, while others are just concerned with what is available to them. Another consideration is knowing our students' interests, backgrounds, motivations, and others. What I mean here is that contextualization is not always cultural. It is also psychological. To contextualize your lessons, you must have a grasp about the nature of your learners' socio-psycho makeup. So some teachers here would comment that those classes with students who are confident with their language facility are those who feel ready to go outside and talk to people. That means the context is not anymore a challenge, but a vast majority would benefit much from the context provided because the context will already be the one that will unfold to them the various learning experiences. They're familiar to it. They know what you mean by the different parts of a boat. They would know the ins and outs in the life there in their coastal community. So the context will provide them with an opportunity to rehearse for the real world context. The second entry point that I'm going to share is, or doc, is done by building a repertoire of techniques for the teachers. Many teachers here in the Philippines agreed that the training provided to them is quite enough, but the training should not only introduce the critical contents prepared by curriculum designers and trainers. It feels like the teachers are just the receiving end in terms of this training. So teachers would feel that they need also a kind of training that will equip them with appropriate strategies. Yes, they know the content in the English language lessons. They may have ideas about the cultural artifacts present in their community, but they don't have the strategies and techniques to integrate them. So some teachers who attended a training on contextualization would simply express that even after attending the trainings, still they get puzzled how to implement contextualization. So most teachers revealed that they depend on their own creativity to integrate the local culture in their lessons, but oftentimes such practice does not seem to prove to be effective. They claim that they do it to at least put context in their lessons. In fact, some of the teachers would simply translate the material. And once they have translated it to their local language, they would feel that it's already contextualized. But we know that translation is just one, or the first stage of contextualizing. It's not the be all and end all of contextualization. So they expressed that they would need training how to integrate the local culture in their language classes, and a collection of strategies would help them so much. So what we are suggesting here is to address this, what we suggest is for teachers to form cohort groups so that they can explore various strategies and techniques that may be used when implementing contextualization. This was proved to be effective when I conducted training programs to teachers in coastal communities, because they can interact, they exchange ideas. In fact, they would clarify the terms, the terms, how you call a particular shell or fish, because, for example, some fish here in the Philippines would have different names in different localities. So they would have to agree about it. So there's a collaboration, a synergy among teachers who would like to identify cultural artifacts and then try to clarify some language content, for example, and then agree on how to integrate them. There was an instance where I also gave a training, and then teachers would create stories collaboratively out of the contexts that they were able to gather. So, for example, I gave them a specific situation, fishing or buying fish in the market. So these teachers would collaborate, make stories, come up with names for their characters, provide a setting, and then do write the plot, and then develop a reading material out of it. But also, it is important that documenting these strategies and techniques will later serve as a compendium of techniques, thus helping our future teachers and practitioners of contextual learning approach. Since time and resources play a major role in the implementation of a contextualized language classroom, teachers then must engage themselves actively in materials development that were drawn, of course, from local cultural and social contents. Most teachers also agree that there should have materials that are contextualized in the local context, since contexts used in the available materials provided are national level cultural contents. So collaborative teaching is also encouraged so that teachers can share relevant context. There are some teachers who would say that sir, we find it difficult to introduce this particular context or this topic because the lesson exemplars, the samples provided by the Department of Education or the agencies who created this curriculum utilized a national level culture. For example, they're going to pick some cultural artifacts from another region that might not be familiar from another region. So the students might be puzzled in understanding what the cultural context is. So this is what I'm saying when teachers need to collaborate amongst their groups so that they can, you know, scaffold the national level cultural content to that of the regional or even to their specific local communities. One issue, however, raised by many practitioners is the availability of cultural markers and expressions. This is true because even if teachers are good in terms of the content, I mean, in grammar, in what they teach, if they need to contextualize, some of the teachers find it difficult to do so because some would say that our community lacks the cultural markers and expressions that I need to use to contextualize their language classes. They would say, sir, there are no available cultural markers here. It was shared that several places seem to have limited resource of maritime context that restrained the teachers in the preparation of contextualized learning materials so that it makes it difficult for them to contextualize their lessons. But for me, the answer here is plain and simple. It's cultural immersion. I think teachers here need to collaborate with the local culture bearers. I would not like to believe and buy the idea that a particular community has no culture. It is rather the lack of documented cultural contents that made it difficult for the teachers to utilize certain local cultures. Some teachers would say that the teachers of English should collaborate with those who work for and within the maritime culture. They need to collaborate with fishermen, with fish vendor, with tourist guides. This is the importance of maritime cultural immersion. In the photo, you can see me working with fishermen. I joined them one time in their work. So this is me. I tried to cover my face here. And I talked to them about how to go about fishing. I'm not from a coastal community. I'm from an inland municipality in Iloilo. So I need to immerse myself. I need to know the ropes about fishing. I need to know what are the different fishing materials and equipment that they use. What do they call this practice, and many others. In fact, some of the fishermen would tell me ideas how to read weather just for me to get the feel of their particular culture. So to ensure that proper use of local cultural contents, teachers must engage themselves in participatory cultural mapping activities with local culture bearers and advocates. In this way, teachers may be able to expose themselves to the vast cultural and social materials that are left unnoticed. There are some cases when teachers would introduce a particular concept and some students would try to correct them in terms of what we call this fish or shell, because the teacher would come from another municipality, not adjacent to the coastal area. So students would be the one to inject the idea of these cultural materials to their teachers. And it's quite interesting as well that the teachers and the students in this particular case collaborate, sharing and exchanging ideas about their cultural contexts. In our course of studying the different ways of implementing contextualization in the classroom, we came across a model for collaboration. In fact, this was conceptualized by one of our colleagues in the university. So this model for collaboration for teachers and the community leaders was designed to go about a participatory approach in gathering local cultural markers and expressions. So we call it collab, or community as learning laboratory, where the teacher is collaborating or working together with the more knowledgeable others from the locality or the community. So we call it the CMKO, while the teacher is also working to the more knowledgeable others from the academe or the AMKO. This resulted to be effective since a more specific gathering of local culture goods and expressions are documented and duly validated by the locals. The AMKO will then serve as materials developer who will then guide the implementing teacher in integrating the requisite knowledge and skills, both from the context and the content. So we tried this out. We collaborated with local fishermen, fish vendor, tourist guides, and talked to them. We stayed in the community for more than a week, and then we exchanged ideas and documented everything. And after which we've gathered all the cultural goods and expressions that we've gathered, and then tried to develop some reading materials, stories that are good for grade 7 students and grade 8 students. So these cultural contents were validated by the locals. At the same time, these stories were validated by our AMKO or the more knowledgeable others in the academe to test the readability of these reading materials, to help us in designing tests for vocabulary and reading comprehension. So this was proved to be effective because now we're using already these materials in the classroom. If not for the pandemic, we would have already tried out and assessed how effective this could have been to our students, but we were restricted by the pandemic. And finally, the last of the docs that I'm going to share with you, or the last of the entry points, will be the call for a shift to making classrooms responsive to cultural dynamics of the learners. Through contextualization, the teacher may be able to invite the attention of the learners because the context is within the frame of reference of the students, making concepts and information relevant for them. So teachers here in the course of our conversation mentioned that with contextualized lessons, the students are able to see the connection of their language lessons. The connection between their language lessons and the real life application of the knowledge, of the skills that they're learning in class. The use of varied activities also made it easy for them to contextualize and to be integrated into the drills and skill practice for the students, because contextualization was made sure that it is not only used as lesson starters, but the context is present at the same time in the drills and even in the assessment part. Because we have noticed that contextualization in most lesson plans or lesson exemplars would only appear in the lesson starter. You know, something that will invite students to situate themselves in the lesson. But it got lost as we go through the instructional sequence. You know, asking about fish and boat in the lesson starter, but injecting snow and other stuff in the drills and assessment doesn't make sense because we got no snow here in the Philippines. As for the use of maritime culture as a local context, or any culture for that matter, whether you come from an upland area and you bring with you your upland culture, your city landscapes and culture, the agricultural context, these contexts can address the local needs and accommodate local situations. This particular point of consideration in contextualizing lessons can support different principles of language learning, particularly the cultural and linguistic underpinnings in language education. Especially here in the Philippines, we have different languages. I don't even know the different languages. I cannot even speak and understand other languages here in the Philippines. But several research suggests that local context must be collated to come up with materials that can facilitate language learning using learners' home culture. In fact, our best friend, Nunan, would even suggest that with this, it would be fitting that instead of language students adjusting to the lessons, which I think is the practice before, because we just design lesson plans and let our students write on it. It should be that lessons are designed to fit the needs of our students. The critical implication of this finding challenges the preparation, utilization, and implementation of the teachers in integrating local culture in the lessons to ensure culturally relevant teaching, since culture and language are linked with each other. Notably, looking at how local culture is integrated into the language classroom, it provides an opportunity to see how contextualization is embedded in Philippine language education. I was able to see how teachers from different school communities, upland and coastal communities, would interpret contextualization. However, as this presentation suggests, there's a need to look into how teachers can be provided with strategies and techniques in integrating local culture in the design of language materials and in the preparation of language assessment. This can guarantee that the entire lesson from presentation to assessment is rich in a culturally responsive language learning experience. This presentation is not an attempt at identifying an effective method in integrating a local culture. Therefore, it may be useful to look also into different methods, guides, paradigms, or framework that teachers can use. There's also a need to navigate the local culture in language classes and understand the relationships and the complex factors that facilitate learning among students with varied experiences. An abundance in the local cultural markers, artifacts, and materials on maritime culture can guide teachers in coastal communities in the framework that they will utilize. Language learning, experience that they will design, and the varying cultural aspects that they can create. That's why the suggestions or entry points that I made, the acknowledgement of their needs, of our learner needs, the importance of local cultural immersion, and understanding and equipping our teachers with the necessary strategies and techniques to integrate culture and content, these are very necessary. But more than that, it's the acknowledgement that we need to shift already our curriculum into making our lessons culturally responsive. Allow me to end this with this note. If there's anything people will ask you what you learned from today's webinar, perhaps I would be happy if you can share this with them. Learners can only learn if they're able to make sense of new information within contexts familiar to them. Madamo gid nga salamat. Thank you very much, and good morning to each and everyone. Thank you, Linda.
Yes, thank you. First of all, Jessie, thank you for that wonderful presentation. I would like to open it up to anyone who has any questions for Jessie. Please unmute and ask your question to Jessie. So if you would like, please go ahead. While we're waiting, I would like to say, Jessie, that this is such an interesting topic, and I give you kudos and your university kudos for implementing this kind of a program, because, you know, when we teach in our traditional classrooms, we're always talking about bringing in realia to the classroom and trying to bring the outside into the classroom. And you have found a way to just make this happen as naturally, I think, as possible, partially probably because of your environment, right? And where you are. But it is just amazing. I have a question in terms of your students. And do you, it sounds like you do, but do you actually take them out, like maybe on a fishing boat, or do you take them on extracurricular activity type things, and how does that work? Do you have large classes or not?
Yes, Lida, it's quite difficult here in the Philippines. Although I would like to say that I'm not the one handling the classes. I'm just the one helping.
Yes.
I'm just the one helping teachers carry out this and implementing contextualization in their classroom. But I tried this once in my senior high school students, but here in the city context. But because of the large class size, I find it difficult to really, you know, bring students outside in the in the city. But I think in the local communities, for example, in coastal communities, it can be managed by the teacher. Normally, the class size here in the Philippines would run from 40 to 50 students in a class. So it's quite of a challenge, but if they're quite familiar with the local, the communities that they are in, the teachers can do so. There was a time when the teacher would introduce, um, I think she was introducing adjectives or something like that, and utilized a literary piece, particularly Romeo and Juliet, for example, to introduce, because they use Romeo and Juliet as as a springboard, as a context in their language lessons to to integrate literature and language as well. But instead of utilizing photos of Romeo and Juliet in the balcony, they would use photos of a husband and wife trying to, hand over in what we call here in the Philippines a bañera, or a basin full of fish to the wife. And that's an expression of love. And they would work on their language lessons out of that.
How fantastic. What a great way to integrate everything. I really love it. Does anyone else have a question for Jessie?
Hello, good morning.
Hello, please go ahead.
I'm Joven Leoborek. Sir Jesse, congratulations. Actually,
And
yeah, Sir Jesse was my teacher in masters.
Ah,
I was taking masters of in UP Visayas. Anyway, sir, it's really true that it needs concerted effort of teachers and the community to teach learners, especially in language teaching. That's why most of the schools, after doing needs analysis and implementing diagnostic tests that informs the teachers the language learning the language learning strategies of the learners, teachers would meet through professional learning communities. So through these gathering, they would discuss on how to further or better the language teaching, incorporating what we call this contextualization. So these are my concerns, sir. So why do you think, this is the first one, why do you think teachers cannot incorporate contextualization in language teaching? That's my first one. The second one is, how will this affect language assessment when concepts or terms used in discussing the lesson using contextualizations are not used in, or are context how will this affect language assessment when concepts or terms used are not context dependent? So we do have standardized assessment, I think. And the third one is, do we have criteria or standardized rubric to make the teachers aware that we are really contextualizing our lessons? Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you very much, Joven. I feel like we're still having our master's degree classes today. But the first one, why do you think teachers are not implementing, or not all teachers are implementing contextualization? I think the first answer to that is many of our teachers, especially, I'm sorry to say this, but especially in public school system, they have varying interpretations of what contextualization is all about. First and foremost, some teachers would say that it's contextualization enough when they were able to translate what the reading materials, what the materials that they have in the local language, and then introduce that to their students, and then pick out adjectives and work on understanding what adjectives are. So I think that's the first one. There's no clear-cut definition or understanding as regards what contextualization is all about. When I was able to look into how the government and the agency assigned defined contextualization, we got friends also from the agency, and we asked them, how would you define contextualization? I am surprised, but not really that surprised, to see that the definitions of contextualization are also based on a foreign definition. I was trying to look for a contextualized definition of contextualization, like how Filipino teachers would interpret contextualization. I think that's the first concern, and that's the first concern that we need to address. Number two is, our teachers here don't feel that they have, yes, the one I mentioned, that they have the necessary requisite strategies and technique to integrate the local culture, and what they need to teach in the English language class. Like how to integrate grammar with fishing and commerce. I mean, they know what fishing and commerce is, they know their grammar, but they don't know how to marry the two. So I think, teachers are quite ambivalent and unsure as to how to go about these things. To your second question, may I know again what's your second question? About the assessment.
Yes, language assessment, sir.
I'm I'm not suggesting that every day, every now and then, the entire instructional sequence will be filled with fish. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is like you need to put context so that students can situate themselves right away to the lesson. Most of our students are detached, especially when we speak about run-on sentences. If we talk about parallelism, we have to teach them these. But which part of their real life situation will they use run-on sentences? So they haven't realized the effect of these run-on sentences in their lives. We get questions more often than not. Sir, why do we need to learn English? We're Filipinos. We need to concentrate on our local language. But the dynamics between globalizing the classroom and introducing English as a language is something very important to us English language teachers. But we have to make sure that these lessons in English or in our language, English language lessons, are also put in the context of our students, that they can easily grasp what it is for, where can they possibly use this, and when can they effectively use the English language in their future situations. So as regards language assessment, yes, there's no standard for that. It is just a context. What I'm saying is you just provide them a background. You're not teaching the context, but you're teaching the language. You're just using the context as background, as as a platform for meaning making, to make things easier for them. Well, unconsciously, we're also teaching a little bit of our culture. Some of our students might not know what you call this particular fish or shell. So in some way, you are also introducing that. And your last question is about, is there any way for us to know whether teachers really have contextualized or not? I think Sir Joven and to the rest, this is what we pursue here in the university. As I've said, we do not prescribe a particular methodology or framework. What we want to know here is we want to discover how teachers go about things. When do we say that a particular class is contextualized? So it is when the students and the teachers collaborate with one another. They know the basis of their language lessons, but at the same time, they know the platform or the context from which these language lessons are derived. If you want really to be very objective and know exactly when can a language lesson become culture-based, I would like to suggest Tharp and Gallimor's activity settings analysis. If you would like to assess, for example, a lesson plan and look into whether a particular culture is present in a lesson. So you might want to utilize Tharp and Gallimore of 1988. They use an activity settings analysis to look which portion of the instructional sequence does culture come in. But I think the worry here is you really have to be first and foremost clear about what definition of culture are you writing on. I mean, in my case, I utilize maritime culture. So I need to research on how do people define maritime culture. So are the life activities in coastal communities part of it? So I need to research for a definition that encompasses. And are the stories, the beliefs, the traditions part of maritime culture? So I need some research to support that definition. And after I've gone through that, and after I've solidified the definition of maritime culture for myself, then that was the time I analyzed each lesson plan, whether that really has cultural aspect riding on maritime culture in that sense. So yes, you can utilize other cultures, upland culture, city landscapes and culture, and other things, no? And use that particular framework or model to to check whether a particular lesson includes a particular culture. I hope, Sir Joven, I was able to answer your query.
Yes, sir. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you, Joven.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? We have a couple of minutes left, so I'm wondering if any of you would like to ask one final question.
Most of my friends here are Filipinos, but they can see some foreign. This is the same thing here in the Philippines, I tell you.
Okay, okay. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jessie.
I think what I can say here, Linda, is our struggle to really put contextualization as part and parcel of our instruction is going to be really an uphill climb, since for one, we don't have yet the time and the spaces to do that. We cannot go to the fields just yet to gather the communities and gather data because of the restrictions brought by the pandemic. But I think teachers and school communities already are introducing this aspect in their curriculum. I can see and I noticed many schools participate already in local government unit-led cultural mapping activities. They are more into analyzing and scanning their environmental cultural spaces and trying to document all these. And I noticed that already, that these things are starting to take the stage. And I hope sooner or later we'll be able to really integrate these. Thank you, Linda.
Absolutely. I think that you have already made a lot of progress, it sounds, in what you're trying to do, and I applaud you for that. I think this is a fantastic endeavor, and maybe we'll have you back again next year, and you can give us some updates and tell us what's happening in your community and with this teaching and the professional development that comes along with that for teachers, right? So thank you so much, Jessie. We really appreciate your time and your energy and explaining to us in layman's terms, perhaps, of the fishing industry and how that's connecting with your classroom and with the students. And I think it was very interesting for all, and we will be posting this. It has been recorded, and we will be posting the information in the webinar on our Facebook page and on our TESOL site. So please look for that so that you can share it again with others who maybe didn't have the chance to hear it today, because I know it was early in the morning for you as well in the Philippines.
It's holiday here in the Philippines, I told you.
Yes, so thank you and happy holidays. Thank you for coming on your holiday. We appreciate all of our participants, and please look at our Facebook page and join us for our upcoming events. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Linda. Thank you, Wei Yu, for helping us, and thank you everyone for attending this webinar. Maraming salamat.
Thank you.